So let's modify this, and we want to create a to-do form. So we're going to need a class to represent our to-do items, and so I'm going to add a folder to put my object in. I'm going to call this entities. And inside of here, I'm going to add a new folder called models. And inside of this models folder, I'm going to add a class called to-do item. So why do I put this folder structure in? This will become more apparent over time, but I like to have a nicely organized structure for where I put my object class or my classes that represent my domain. And so here I'm going to make this a public class called to-do item, and I'm going to I like using goods as my ID fields, so I'm going to use a good, which is a generalized unique ID. It's a random unique ID so that every one of my to-do items will have its own unique ID. And then I'm going to put a title and a description, and then maybe a Boolean for is done, and then maybe a date time for completion date. And then this will initialize to false. I think you'll notice that you get these warnings. Non-null title must contain a non-null value when exiting a constructor. Well, one way to deal with that is that, you know what, we can make this nullable. So I'm going to make these nulls. So null will mean that, you know, we're waiting for an input to have. Good ID doesn't need to have a nullable value. We can actually we could initialize it to a new good ID, but I actually think I'm just going to there's an empty good, which is all zeros essentially. So I'm going to start it off with an empty. Eventually we'll be putting this into a database. So we'll just start them off with empties for now. And so this is my to-do item. I'm going to clean this up. There's a remove and sort usings method here, which we can use to clean this up. And I'm going to put in a documentation comment. Oops, wrong language. That's you know, represents a single item in a to-do list. Maybe I'll put in my date. By the way, if you do a lot of things, a trick you can do is just drag them over there, and then they can be inserted wherever you want them. I'm going to rename this file header, and then and so in the future I can just do this. And since I'm going to have to put in the date myself, purpose, I'm going to have to create, and that I'll just do this actually, make it more generic. That just depends. If you were working with a company, you might put a copyright notice in that. But okay, so we've got this, and that's my to-do item. So let's see. I'm going to go to my main page, XAML, and my backup page. And I guess the way I want to modify this is I'm going to have a to-do item. Property here instead of this, and we'll take this stuff out. And what I want to do is I want to put in for each of these attributes, I want to have something that, so I'll want to have a title. And I'm going to see what happens if I just do this. Just to keep it simple initially. I know I'm going to want a button later on. And we have a toolbox, so let's see. We want, actually, let's drag a label and see what it gives us for, yeah, that gives us that as the basic. And then I want an entry. And let's just see what this looks like. Okay, so we're on track here. And so we'll need a bunch of these pairs. So we need a title, a description, here we're going to want is done. We don't want an entry for that. We're going to want a checkbox. And I didn't see it there, so I looked up in the documentation for MAUI. And let's see. Here's the documentation on checkbox. And I think I'm going to want something like this. let's see, it's done. And then completion date. Let's see, label. We'll throw a date picker in there. And we'll run that and see what that looks like. So we've got a checkbox. We can pick a date. We can put a title, put a description. Fortunately, description, I can't put carriage returns in here. So I would like a multi-line thing for the description. So an entry doesn't look good for description. Let's see what an editor does for us. That looks interesting. Let's see what types. So there's a bunch of properties you can set. You can click down here. The other way you can view the properties is over this way. And so we can arrange the properties by name. Let's see. Let's see if we have some options here that we can use. And so I'm going to look up in the documentation for .NET MAUI, we have editor. And it explains it allows us to enter and edit multiple lines of text. We have auto size, change to size to accommodate user input. By default doesn't auto size, and then there's text alignment options. There's a lot of different options in here. I'm going to try this auto size option. So let's go to the editor and say auto size is equal to, and we see here in our IntelliSense it tells us disabled or text changes. So let's do that. I'm going to save this and then run it. And now this is the behavior I want. I can write multiple things and it will increase automatically in size. So yeah, so we have a form, and now we just need to be able to click me and get the values out of here. Okay, so now we need to go, we want to have something happen when this button clicks. Right now we're not able to do much. So what we want to have happen is we want to create a to-do item from the form data. And so I'm going to start off just keeping it simple. I'm going to say to-do item equals a new to-do item. And I'm going to say the title. So if we look at our class here, that's one of the fields. Well, how do we get that title? Well, what we need to do is, if we look at this entry, we need some way of grabbing it, and the way to get it is to get we need to set the name property. And I'm going to call this, I like the names to be related to what they are. So I'm going to call it title entry. And actually, we're going to do it this way. I'm going to say entry title. And we'll see why in a second. And if you forget about how to do that, if you look down here, let's see, do they provide it to me? Okay, they don't make it easy. So each one of these, I'm going to put in description, and then this one, looks like they prefer this format, so I'm going to use what they use by default. So each of these now has a name, and if I go into here now, I should be, so I want the title from an entry, so if I type entry, there it is, entry title.text. And then we can say, then we can work through all of these. So description is equal to the editor description, and is done will be equal to checkbox is done dot, and we got to figure out which one we want. That's what I want, is checked. And then my to-do item dot completion date is going to be equal to, let's see, what do I have here? Date picker. You can also come over here and copy and paste. Sometimes that's easiest. Looks like if you make a change, you may need to do a build. Let me look up date picker, and let's see if we can find an example. That's creating it. Okay, here it is, date. That's the property we want. So if I click on here, there we go, that property. So we're using right now we're using the names. If we set a name for an XCOMMA name for our attribute or our control, we can use different properties for those different types of controls to get the value out, and then we can store that in our object. And so just to see that happen, I'm going to put a stop point here and run in debug mode. And then I'm going to click this, and let's see what happens. So if I step through this, we made a new to-do item. If I look at it right now, it's got all the defaults. So it's got all these settings are right now to their defaults. And then I'm going to look, if you can see here, we can already see what the things I typed in are available through these properties. So if I through this, I can see that now to-do item got that title that I typed. Step over again. The to item now has the description I typed. Step over again. So now it's pulling all of these things from the controls into my class object. And at the end, I end up with to-do item having all of the settings. Now we didn't set the ID. We could do that. And what we could do with that one is we could say to-do item dot ID is equal to, and to make a new GUID, you can just say new GUID. It doesn't need to two-string it. This will create a brand new GUID. And so if I run it this time, there it is, empty. I step over, and now we've created a GUID. This is just a randomized value that gives it a unique ID. And as I go through each one of those, we can see that each of these fields were filled from the entries I put in. So that's how we can get our class object loaded from the form. Now what do I want to do with this? Well, I guess it depends on what I want to do with this. Maybe what I'll do is, for now, I'll just make a toString. And I'll just return, maybe all we need for our toString is, we will format a string that says title and its completion status. Maybe that's enough. And so we need some place to display that. Maybe we'll just put underneath this button. We'll start this off with we'll just say, hey, please click on this button. And we'll change this name to maybe submit button. I'm going to change this to on submit clicked, which means that because I changed it, this needs to also change. And what we'll do at the end here is to show something on, and again, doesn't know what this is, we need to do a build. Then it'll know what it is. And we'll just set the text property equal to our to-do item dot toString. And now we have and you see our little notice shows up here. There's our label. We click that. It makes our to-do item. There we go. And then I'm just going to hit continue. And it says do laundry, and yes, it was done. If I click that, so we can make different items and actually each time it's making an item, but it's not updating anything. And that will be something to look at in the future. But for right now, this is how we can make a basic form that we can fill information in and then get information out of. Thank you very much. Hello. So the next thing to do is, in our to-do application, is to add it to source control. So to add it to source control, we can click on this button down here. You also have the option to use the menus here. And select the source control we want. There's only one option here right now, which is Git. And I'm going to select the account. For the owner, you can pick yourself, or if you're a member of an organization, which I've set up an organization for my course here. So I'm going to pick that, and you can give it a name. I'm going to make this to-do tutorial. And then optionally you can put a description. I'm going to leave this one private. And then you create and push. Oh. And you'll see down here that a branch has been created, main. There's no pending changes. They've all been pushed. And you can visit your new GitHub repo online by clicking these ellipses here and selecting Open in Browser. And that will open up a web page which brings you directly to where your application is. So we have this starting application. The other thing I like to do is, right now there's one branch, there's a main branch. I like to work with multiple branches. And so what a branch is in GitHub is basically, you could think of it as a save point in a way. Essentially it means that the branch will, if I leave the main branch like this, it'll be the way we started the application. I'm going to create a new branch, and I'm going to call this my dev branch. And so my workflow will generally be to develop things on the dev branch, and then once I'm satisfied with the dev branch, I will merge my changes into main. And what that allows me to do is make sure that if I ever need to go back to the way things were before, sometimes you go down a bad pathway and you really wish you could go back. It makes it easy to then just go back to main and branch a new dev branch off of that and work back to where it was. So this gives you basically a backup. And if you've ever saved multiple versions of your program on a directory, this allows you to do that. Now, to really learn how to use GitHub and Git specifically, I recommend going to the Git SCM website, and this is where the technology for Git resides. And by the way, this is also where you can download Git when you're installing Visual Studio. If you didn't get it, you can download it for Windows and install this, and it will install Git. But there's also this book here, Pro Git. There's multiple chapters in here, but if you read these first 3 chapters, Getting Started, Git Basics, and Git Branching, that will give you a lot of what you need to know to really understand this material much more closely. And they give examples. You can run through this like an exercise, all at the command line, and it's useful to learn this at the command line. And they show you, conceptually what is happening with these branches. And so here you can see there's a testing branch, there's a master branch, and then there are these different checkouts, and that's what we will be doing. Is you can see here a new branch is created, this would be maybe our dev branch instead of testing. Once we're satisfied with it, we would check in the master branch to that new one, and we would progress forward in order to merge things and always have a backup of the way things work. So I recommend reading those chapters to really learn this. But I'll be demonstrating using that approach as we go forward. So that's how to check things into source control. Thank you very much.